welcome to ECCB Connects. This week we'll be looking at the establishment of a credit bureau for the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union. We have with us Ms. Alyssa Glass, Senior Bank Examiner in the Bank Supervision Department. Alyssa, welcome to ECCB Connects.
Thank you for having me.
Alyssa, plans to establish a credit bureau for the Eastern Caribbean Currency member countries have been on the table for quite some time. In 2007, those plans have been, progressing, taking further steps. But when we speak about a credit bureau, what exactly are we talking about?
A credit bureau is a type of credit reporting system, and credit reporting systems comprise the systems, the institutions, the individuals, and the technology, and the rules that allow for credit information sharing on borrowers. Credit bureaus specifically facilitate the decision-making process of lenders as they generate information on borrowers from financial institutions such as banks and credit unions, other credit granting institutions such as hire purchase firms, utilities companies, for example, towards creating a credit history for each borrower. Once the credit history is created, then a credit report can be generated, and that is the usual product of a credit bureau, a credit report for a borrower.
Although we do not have an official credit bureau in the region, we do financial institutions, when persons come to borrow loans and so on, they do some sort of credit checks.
Right. Currently, the institutions do credit checks. I mean, it's an important part of assessing a borrower and the risk that they pose to their institution. For example, a bank granting a loan to an individual. However, the process is currently very tedious and a long one, because the process currently entails that financial institutions contact other financial institutions. So you can imagine how long this will take if, for example, a borrower has multiple credit accounts at different institutions. The process will be a long one because you'd have to contact each institution to find out about the borrower's credit history at that institution. That's why the credit bureau is really important for us, and particularly at this point where we have a situation of high credit risks at our institutions, because the credit bureau will provide a number of benefits, and the main objectives for the ECCB in working towards the establishment of a credit bureau for the ECCU are: one, the importance of ensuring that there's centralized access to comprehensive, reliable information on borrowers in helping financial institutions make credit decisions. And these credit decisions will be based on assessing the risk of the borrower via information that is generated in a credit report, which is very easy to download from the system once the credit bureau starts operations. The other benefit for us, or the other objective for us for this credit bureau in the ECCU, will be ensuring that there's greater access to credit. And this is important because typically you have some markets that are underserved as it relates to being able to access credit via loans, for example. And these include micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, and individuals also, such as those who are self-employed and may not be able to establish a credit history. So the credit bureau will facilitate greater access to credit for those previously underserved markets.
So the smaller person, the smaller business owner, they will now have greater access to credit.
Right. It'll be easier for them to be able to access credit because all the information in terms of their credit history will be centralized, and they will be able to establish a borrower behavior pattern, which would show, for example, that they meet their payments on time in the past, and also they've stuck to the agreement or the loan contract in terms of the conditions that have been applied once the contract is entered into.
The ECCB has been working with the International Financial Corporation and a number of regional stakeholders to put measures in place to establish the credit bureau. Take us through what has been done so far and where you are now.
Well, the ECCU Credit Bureau project, which is managed by the ECCB, is receiving technical assistance from the International Finance Corporation, as you mentioned. The project is actually funded by Global Affairs Canada, and the objective really is for us to establish the legal, regulatory, and supervisory framework for the establishment of an advanced credit reporting system in the ECCU, which we hope will be in the form of a credit bureau. The Credit Bureau project so far has accomplished one main goal, which has been drafting a bill for the credit reporting in the ECCU and comprehensive regulations for credit reporting. The draft legislative package has gone through a number of reviews, and that includes reviews by the attorneys general in the ECCU and also the financial industry. We've also had the drafts reviewed by the ECCU Credit Bureau Legal and Regulatory Working Group, which was established specifically for that purpose. The next steps in the project would be the operator selection process, which will include the steps to take towards determining which company will operate the credit bureau in the ECCU, and public awareness and education initiatives, which will intensify as the project progresses.
Let's now look at the credit bureau itself and how it will work. How will information be gathered and shared?
The Credit Bureau will gather information from a number of sources, and these sources include financial institutions, for example, banks, credit unions, and other financial credit granting institutions, including hire purchase firms and telecommunications companies. The Credit Bureau collects this information towards creating a credit history for a borrower, and then a credit report will be generated for each borrower. The credit report is almost the final product of a credit bureau, which is going to be used by these same financial institutions to be able to assess a borrower and that the risk that they may pose to the institution. So information such as the borrower's past history in terms of their payment history, and also how much in the past they've met the terms of the agreements of their loan contracts. This is also important information that will create the credit report. The Credit Bureau will also source information from public sources, which would include any court judgments or any bankruptcy filings that a borrower may have had in the past. This is all going to be pulled together towards creating a credit report. In addition to credit reports, credit bureaus also provide other services which can be added on eventually once the credit bureau starts operations, including things like credit scores, anti-identity theft services, and anti-fraud services, for example.
So the Credit Bureau will really be gathering very sensitive and confidential information about a person. Let's say an individual has concerns about how this information will be used.
Right. So the draft credit reporting legislation currently makes provisions for these types of issues. So there are confidentiality notes in the legislation, and also specific requirements for securing data. But just to mention that it's important that borrowers are aware that their credit report cannot be accessed unless they provide a written consent to a lender to access their report. And this consent is normally provided by signing a consent form. And only then can a borrower's credit report be generated, and the lender can use that information towards making a credit decision about that borrower. The credit reports will assist the lender in determining if they're going to approve the credit in the first place and the terms of the credit. So, for example, they may decide to give you a better interest rate if you have a very good credit report. So these are things that will be considered by lenders in determining who they will grant a credit to.
Now, you've mentioned that with the Credit Bureau, it's really financial institutions getting these reports in the process of determining who they're going to lend
Right.
who they're going to give a loan to. But let's say an individual wants to find out what's their credit score. Can they access that?
The draft legislation allows for borrowers to access their credit reports. The Credit Bureau is required to provide a borrower with one free credit report every year. So yes, borrowers can access their own reports.
Alyssa, who will be responsible for operating the ECCU Credit Bureau?
The draft legislation allows for a private credit bureau to be operated in the region. The Credit Bureau selection process will commence once the legislation has been passed in all 8 member territories. And as I mentioned, it will be one credit bureau for the ECCU. The operator selection process will try to ensure that the credit bureau that is set up, the company that is chosen to set up the credit bureau, will be one that will have advanced and modern systems, be able to provide security for all the information that they are collecting, and also to ensure data integrity to make sure that the information that they're providing to lenders is accurate on each borrower. The company that is chosen will also be required to meet the requirements as stipulated in the legislation, and these would include things like minimum capital requirements and minimum security requirements.
Alyssa, before we end, let's just recap the main benefits of the Credit Bureau to the people of the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union.
I'll just highlight the 2 main benefits that consumers can expect to receive from the establishment of a credit bureau in the ECCU. One, there should be shorter processing times for loans, and the approval process will be quicker because the information that they require to make these assessments on the loans will be centralized and be able to accessed more efficiently. The second will be greater access to finance, particularly for persons who may have in the past not been able to access credit because they don't have a steady income. So, for example, those who may be self-employed.
Okay, so greater access to credit and shorter time for loan approval.
Great, yes.
Alyssa, thank you very much for speaking with us on ECCB Connects.
It was a pleasure, Shumalon.
You're watching ECCB Connects, protecting our currency, developing our region. And now for this week's financial tip.
Do you have insurance coverage for your health, property, or vehicle? Insurance coverage can provide you with financial assistance in the event of a catastrophe.
To view any episode of ECCB Connects, anytime, any place, at your convenience, check out our YouTube channel, ECCB Connects.
That's it for this week's episode of ECCB Connects. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and if you have a question, send us an email to the address at the bottom of your screen. See you next time.